Hello, today we're going to talk about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and asking why it works and is there another way to understand it. One of the big changes in the treatment of mental health, at least in the UK in the last 10 years, has been the widespread increase in availability of one particular therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's become very popular with the government programs here run through the NHS and local counselling programs run through the NHS called IAPT. And so if you go to the doctor, you'll often hear that you're given a referral or a prescription onto CBT-based therapies. So it does raise a question of, why was CBT suddenly so popular? Why is it successful? And is there another way to understand that? And I think when you look at the nervous system and you understand the nervous system, it's quite interesting to re-examine the argument for CBT and the ways in which it might be working. The idea, or one of the key ideas in cognitive behavioral therapy is that things like anxiety and depression, which are the symptoms that it's prescribed to treat, are caused by our thinking, our thoughts. And it's easy to see why people would think this, because if you wake up in the morning and you think, everybody hates me, I'm going to get fired today, and then I'm never going to get another job, then clearly I'm going to feel anxious. I may even feel depressed, and it's going to affect my behavior during the day. It may make me more negative, may make me less of a good colleague, perform less well at work, and ironically, therefore, can become a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. If I think everybody hates me and I'm going to be fired, it probably makes it more likely that people are not going to like me and I'm not going to be good at my job. So the idea of CBT, or at least part of the idea of CBT, is to change the way we think, to change the way we feel. And that's fine, but I don't think that's all of the story, because when you look at what happens in the nervous system, it's actually the order of events seems to be the other way around. So look at what happens in the nervous system as a chain of dominoes. Thinking is quite far down the chain of dominoes. Earlier on in the chain of dominoes is what we would call the physiology. So what's going on in the body? What's going on in the nervous system? You see, there's no particularly good reason for me to think nobody likes me and I'm going to get fired from my job unless my body is already giving me signals of threat and danger. Because in fact, if you think about what's going on as activity passes through the brain, the order of events is that something is happening in my body, which is then traveling up my brainstem, going into my brain, and being interpreted in my language processing, my thinking human brain up here, and then being returned back down into the more mammalian and reptile processes further down the brainstem and in the body. And this kind of has a feedback loop, but it also definitely has a specific order. It starts somewhere. And what we would say is that there's an awful lot of unfinished business in the nervous system. So there's an awful lot of threat response, which has been frozen into the nervous system during periods of overwhelm, that unfortunately in human beings, we're very bad at unfreezing and discharging. So the problem is when we hit those areas where we're already overwhelmed and where there's stuff in the body, in the nervous system, waiting to wake up and to stimulate us, then what happens after it's stimulated in the body is that it travels up into the mind and into the brain and creates thoughts. Now these thoughts then create different versions of reality. They then affect our relationships, they affect our behavior, and this can have consequences in the real world, which then could create, in the here and now, further difficulties and even further threats. So there's definitely an advantage to interrupting that feedback loop. And this is where I think CBT comes in and where it's been very powerful and very successful, is that instead of being a hamster on a wheel that goes round and round and round creating more and more threat, because the external threat has created a reaction in the reaction in the body creates a thought in the mind, the thought in the mind then turns negative, that negativity then becomes another threat, and we go back to square one. we can interrupt that with CBT. But where I would take issue with it is I don't think it's fair to say we can cure it with CBT, because the thought was not the origin of the problem. The physiology was the origin of the problem that created the thought that then accelerated the problem. So CBT is very good for slowing down a process which can take over us, but I don't think it should be thought of as the solution to the problem itself. So if we really want to think about how to unwind ourselves to the point where we don't even have to be doing the CBT exercises to keep things under control, what we want to do is we want to go back into the body. So it's great to catch our thinking and to notice that, for example, I'm catastrophizing. So if I wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to get fired today, it's a disaster, and I start to freak myself out, it's great to say, okay, hold on. What's the evidence for this? Am I being reasonable? Is this really a helpful thing to think? Can I change my thinking? And of course I can. Of course I can say, well, I've been working here for 5 years. I haven't been fired yet. I wasn't fired yesterday. I probably won't be fired today. Let's just go to work and enjoy it. But beneath that, there's something else to be done. So beneath the thinking that I'll be fired today is a place in the body that's like a fire alarm that's going off. So rather than just undoing the thoughts, if I can park the thoughts and use the noticing of those negative thoughts as a way of telling myself there's something more to be done, there's a body exploration to be done, then I can get into, say, for example, the body scan. I can go into my body and I can start to find if there are uncomfortable places in my physiology that are asking me to allow them to finish some unfinished process that comes from earlier in my life. And if I can do that, then I might get to the point where I'm comfortable enough that I no longer have these negative thoughts. And that's the real gold in all of this, is to get to a place where we're comfortable and present in the here and now, and that my assessment of risk, my assessment of threat from my body matches the assessment of threat from my brain. So these three parts of my brain, the human, the mammal, and the reptile, or the cognitive system and the limbic system, actually add up and they agree. So I don't have to be inventing invisible lions to freak myself out, and I don't have to be ignoring the lions in my history and in my past that I really do need to finish running away from. So if I can use CBT as a tool to slow down my physiology, slow down my feedback loops, but also use it as a guide to tell me where the real work, the deeper work, the transformational work of fixing the original problem can be begun, then it's very valuable. The difficulty, I think, that many people in the UK has faced and worldwide is that CBT is often sold to them as the answer, as the cure. But unfortunately, it can't even begin to address the real problem, the real origin of the problem, because the problem is in the body and not in the mind, and CBT is a tool for the mind. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is Benjamin Fry talking about some of the concepts from my recent book, The Invisible Lion. If you'd like to read more about that or see more of the resources I refer to, please go to the website, theinvisiblelion.com, and see more about the book and the resources tab.